Welcome to Civitas LA, where we feature diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. Thank you all again for joining us, particularly as we conclude our four-part series where we've had the great opportunity to meet with four dynamic leaders who are moving South Los Angeles forward. Once again, we're particularly grateful to Los Angeles City Council member Curran Price for his very kind introduction of the beginning of this series, and we're also grateful to Mr. Darrell Nation of One Nation's Legacy, LLC, who has generously supported this four-part series on South Los Angeles. Community Build was forged out of crisis, the civil unrest in Los Angeles in 1992, and at that time and still the largest civil unrest in the United States. Since that time, Community Build has worked to provide critical services across South Los Angeles, support existing and encourage new business activity, but also aim to empower individuals and put them on a path to self-sufficiency. So with us today, we are grateful to have Robert Sausedo, President and CEO of Community Build, with us. Robert was just appointed as President and CEO last year to Community Build, but has a very rich history related to South Los Angeles. Robert, welcome to Civitas LA.
Well, thank you, and I'm excited to be here and be a part of this wonderful form of communication.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Robert, you have been with Community Build now for about a year, but share with our audience your journey prior to your selection as CEO of Community Build.
Certainly. You know, prior to coming here, I started my career early in sales. So ex-Xerox, was in healthcare sales for a number of years. And then the last 15, 20 years, spent a lot of time in two markets, in energy efficiency. So before it became the green economy, I was already doing it.
Okay.
Mostly in the municipal marketplace throughout California. Became the face of an organization that I worked for a number of years, and drove a lot of projects to help those facilities go green. So excited about that. And of course, financial services. And then right around 2014, semi-retired and focused more on a family business that we had to help my wife get that moving forward. And then I got a little bored. I had something I wanted to do, and I wanted to get reconnected to the community in a more meaningful way like I had early in my career. And so I took an opportunity with Supervisor Mark Riley Thomas as one of his deputies. And that was perhaps one of the most fulfilling things I'd done. And I believe it was what I needed to have a heart change coming from corporate to back to community in order to do the best work I could do for the community. So that's been my journey here. Got recruited, turned it down twice. And then, as you know, I'm an assistant pastor at Los Angeles Community Church in LA, and was praying about it. And in my spirit, the Lord just saying, this is for you. And everything that I did from that point forward lined up for me to be here. And so here I am.
Well, we certainly appreciate Supervisor Mark Riley Thomas, and we consider him a friend of the show. So what motivated you to take on this role at Community Build at this time?
So the motivation was being at a crossroads in my career, or at least looking at a new career life. I believe that I was called to do this. And I believe that when I prayed about it, God demonstrated to me that he was putting me in a position to bring the greatness out in the people, both who work for Community Build, the community, and the services that we provide. And so far, that's exactly what's happened.
That's great. Let's set the scene for our audience. Can you share the general boundaries of the service area that Community Build focuses on?
Sure. So two answers to that. First and foremost, we are throughout South Los Angeles. With respect to our contract for GRID, which is the Gang Reduction and Youth Development through the mayor's office, our boundaries are Washington on the north, Slauson on the south, Figueroa on the east, and La Cienega on the west. And then we work with a number of prevention agencies to help street culture involved individuals, is what I refer to them as, get a path to being a part of the mainstream part of our society.
You know, Community Build came about in the aftermath of the unrest in 1992, and I'm wondering if you've seen the Netflix movie LA 92.
Yes.
And I'm just curious to know, where were you in 1992? Where were you doing that?
Wow. At that time, I was working for Xerox Corporation as a sales rep, and I was living in Diamond Bar. I worked out of the Orange County office in Santa Ana. And I happened to be in LA the day of the verdict when it kicked off. And I remember working my way towards the freeway, and it was just total pandemonium. And when I got back home, I was so restless. I said, I got to go back and help. So I got back in my car, came back that night, and I was on the streets the entire time of the riots, helping people. We helped folks evacuate burning buildings, worked close with LAPD on the street. We got shot at a couple of times. I mean, it was really something. And I spent a lot of time at First AME. And the most memorable thing that came out of that experience, and a lot of people, he doesn't get a lot of credit for this, but the comedian Sinbad, he had his driver driving him around, and the inspiration that he showed up and helped people with along the way, and the words of encouragement. And then I worked with he and his family to help a family get on their feet. And there were several stories like that came out of the riots, where you had beauty for ashes. And he never once looked for any kind of recognition for that. He just did the work. And that's what I'm about, is people, being a person just does the work. And so in '92, I got involved. I decided to leave Xerox at that time, moved back to Los Angeles, and got re-engaged in a post-Riot Project, which is the Jefferson Branch Library.
Well, that's certainly, a key value and a key mantra of our program overall, and our podcast is, interviewing people like yourselves, those who actually are showing up and doing the work that's necessary to move a region forward. Since those days, community builders have been at the forefront of developing programs to meet the needs of community. What were some of the programs that were started at that time, and how have those programs evolved in these last 20, 25 years?
Sure. So Community Build over the years, the bulk of their business has been city contracts of some sort. So they've ranged everything from family source to grid, and before that it was called bridges. So they've done a number of different types of programs, yes.
And for our audience, given that we do have a global audience and a national audience and a local audience, share some of those programs and the acronyms for it.
GRID stands for Gang Reduction and Youth Development, which comes out of the mayor's office, and it's a program that's designed to do prevention and intervention.
Okay.
And so on the prevention side, we deal with young people that are aged 10 to 15 who are on the fence to become what I refer to as street culture involved. I never refer to anyone as a gang member because of the RICO Act, but I do, street culture involved can mean many things, right? And so we help them get on a path to cleaning up their grades, getting back in school properly. If there's a need for counseling, some of these young people come from street culture involved individual families, and a variety of other types of services. We help those parents get counseling as well. And then on the intervention side of things, we have a team of interventionists who go out so that if there is some type of an event between street culture involved individuals from different communities, we go out and suppress that. And that's a very valuable tool to the Los Angeles Police Department. And across the city, the GRID interventionists have saved the city about $150 million in murder investigations. Shootings are down from 1,200 to just under 300 in 2019. And that number continues to be consistent. And that's because of the hard work that goes in. If you remember during the protest recently,
right,
South LA did not have the National Guard, thanks to Assistant Police Chief Regina Scott. But also, the interventionists got together and began to talk to street culture involved individuals and say, hey, look, this is not our fight, stand down. And as a result, it was quiet in South LA. So that's the work you didn't see. And it's interesting because between that and our Project Save program, where we help 30,000 kids make it to and from school every year, it was interesting to see that the work that we do often goes unrecognized because you don't see it. It just happens.
Yeah.
You know how you were able to walk to the park safely today? Yeah, that's what we do.
Well, I was going to ask you, how do you measure the success of these programs?
So there are some metrics that are part of our contracts that we utilize. But really it's about having the right people. So there's some folks that were probably very involved in street culture that decided, hey, I want to do something different and make a difference. And so they come and work for us, and we're the vehicle that allows them to do the work that they do. Our Vice President of Intervention Services, Leon Gillette, is known throughout the city for the work that he does. Many of the interventionists have grown up under him, and he's trained many of them for all the different agencies. And so it's interesting, our work dynamic. I rely on him heavily, but that's not my strong suit. I'm an economic development guy.
Okay.
And so on that side of our business, I rely on him. And when we're together, I never say my employee or what have you. I say we work together.
Sure.
Because he's the voice for that side of the business. And then on the economic development front, we've got a number of things that I'm putting in place to help us from an endowment standpoint, as well as building out some other things that we'll bring to the community.
Sure, and having succeeded the founder of the organization, who served for so many years, what are some of the initiatives that you're looking at to move the organization forward?
Certainly. So one of the things I saw, Community Build has never had a formal philanthropic part of their business or our business. And so I'm putting those measures in place to go after philanthropic dollars.
Okay.
The second thing I'm doing on the economic development front is twofold. First and foremost, creating social enterprises. So we are currently incubating a small business that does virus protection. So as these facilities open up, if you've seen in China where they go through with the foggers and fog the bus stations, we now have that equipment, and we'll be launching that in the next couple of weeks as a partnership. We'll help them with their business development, and in exchange, we'll have a piece of the margin that comes back to Community Build. We're also going to launch a company called CBI Tech that deals with artificial intelligence for back office needs. We're currently testing that out. And then we've got a couple of other small businesses that we're looking at. We're also looking at some legacy opportunities, businesses that have been owned in South LA by families that maybe the kids don't want to maintain, and picking those up as a social enterprise to help continue to fund the organization and put people to work. On the other side of that spectrum, we do housing development. So we just released in January, we're the first Triple H project to come online.
Can I stop you right there, Robert? Can you explain, please, for our guests, Triple H?
Certainly. So Triple H is one of the measures. So in the county, there was Measure H, and for the city, there was HHH. And this was funding put in place to create housing for homeless and services. And so there were two bonds floated about $1 billion, and then that money was then earmarked to help build housing for those in need or experiencing homelessness. In our particular project, we house veterans who were experiencing homelessness, families and individuals, and then of course we have transitional housing for youth, as well as 14 of those units are for low-income families.
Okay.
And they range from singles to 3-bedroom units. And then on the 88th Street side, we have about 10,000 square feet of office space. We occupy half of it as a youth center for that part of town, and our main office is in Leimert Park. And then on the upper floor, we are in partnership with Sharp Mental Health Services, where they provide those types of services as part of the supportive network that we have for the tenants at the location. And we'll continue to do more development like that. So currently we have another site that I'll be announcing in a few months, where we're looking to do about 90 units of additional permanent supportive housing units. And then hopefully at our corporate office in Leimert Park, I'm real excited about this idea, but we've got to vet it out a bit. My goal is to increase our commercial office space there, and then depending on what I'm able to do in accordance to height restrictions, build about 3 or 4 levels of for-sale condos for individuals who want to have a point of entry into the marketplace for home ownership. So we've been very aggressive, and I'm a bit bullish. I get teased a lot and say, "When do you sleep?" And it'll happen when it happens.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you referenced your offices in Leimert Park, and also this potential housing opportunity in Leimert Park, because clearly Leimert Park, along with other parts of South Los Angeles, are getting a lot of attention these days. And prior to COVID hitting us, there was a lot of public and private investment coming into South Los Angeles. Some of that was causing a little bit of angst in certain quarters, particularly Leimert Park, which I think is also going to be on the new Metro rail line. Give me your thoughts on public and private investment coming into the region, and whether you think that's good, that's bad. How do you manage the fears that some may have?
So and the fears are very real. It's interesting. Here's the good news. Private capital markets are responding to the marketplace, and particularly when you think about some of the tools that are out there for them to invest. So the downside of that, though, is there's very limited government dollars to support that. So the ability to hold someone accountable to 50 or 100% affordable housing, the tools aren't there for them to do that. When we had the Community Redevelopment Agency in place, that's when we were able to create more affordable housing opportunities, right? And so there are tax credits available now, but it's very limited. And I think there's a conversation that's being had now about how do we bring back CRA to do that, so that there's a true balance. I remember a couple of years back, I was at a community meeting, and the big G word, right, gentrification. And I didn't take gentrification as seriously as some were at the time. And I remember my thought was always, just don't sell your mama's house, right?
Right.
And then I thought about it, and I heard a lady say this who was a renter. She says, you know, what bothers me is that they come to us and survey us for these developments, and they use our data to build housing that we can never afford. And that made me sit up in my seat. And I talked to her afterward. I said, can you break that down for me a little more? Because I haven't been close to this subject at that time. And that is what got me to really look at where's the fairness in this model. So there's the investment side of this, right? If you do the kind of housing that we do, there needs to be a relook at how housing gets let, because I could literally build a structure where there's homeless people that may not get housed because they're not in the system or organized enough to know when to show up and apply. So there's a piece. To me, there's another class of gentrification that takes place. Like in Jefferson Park, for example, there's an entire building of people that have moved into the community because they knew how to respond that weren't from the community.
Okay.
So what does that say about housing people? So now, if I were an elected official, and you're talking to me, you say, well, wait a minute. We allowed you to build this in our community, but the same 10 homeless people that were there before you built it are still there. Well, that's because there's some fair housing laws that we have to follow when we build these things, if the federal money in particular is involved. So we've got to look at those types of things and begin to bring that to the conversation. We also have to look at how do we reduce the cost per unit. It's costing $500,000 to $700,000 per unit to build. That's ridiculous. So what are some of the new products or the other unique opportunities, maybe containerization and housing from that perspective? So those are conversations that are being had as we move forward. One of the things I'm really excited about is I have a place at the table. So we'll see what comes in the coming years in terms of how we really get through that process.
Well, that's great. And certainly, again, with the Metro line being expanded, the Crenshaw line being expanded down towards the airport, again, Leimert Park has been such a central core of African-American culture and history in Los Angeles. What are some of the key economic drivers and potential that you see for the area going forward?
Certainly. I think the number one driver, and I have to give a lot of credit to Supervisor Mark Riley Thomas in this regard, is the conversation around biotech. When you hear biotech or big pharma, you think about PhDs and highly educated people. But probably 80% of the workforce is certificated in the manufacturing side of the business and the delivery of product side of the business. And these are jobs that are lower to middle income class earning type potentials. There's a conversation about bringing that into Los Angeles, into the South Los Angeles, and specifically Crenshaw corridor, perhaps. The other area I think is a growth area. As you know, many of the studios around town prior to COVID were overbooked, but not by studios in America, from European studios. So that created a shortage and a gap for studio time. So now there's the need to build more studios. So if you look out in Simi Valley, there's an entire development that was built just to meet that need for local needs. There's conversations being had about bringing that into South LA as well. And what that does is it creates, it feeds the entire ecosystem of the entertainment business. Now you've got all these other jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities. And of course, we have to deal with things like AB 5 to overturn that so that these folks can go to work as independent contractors if that's how they're working.
And can you speak a little bit about AB 5, Assembly Bill 5 in Sacramento?
Certainly. Definitely something that is near and dear to my heart to deal with. Assembly Bill 5 was passed and went into law this past July, a month ago. And effectively what it means is that it was originally targeted towards the gig economy. So organizations like Uber and Lyft and Grubhub, that industry to unionize the drivers. The unintended consequences of AB 5, I should say, is that it grossly impacted independent contractors, and specifically the law is very deleterious to African Americans that work in the gig economy and or as independent contractors. So for example, if you think about the person that sings in the choir and leads the choir director, they work as independent contractors in churches. If you think about organizations like mine, over 50% of nonprofits use independent contractors for one reason or another. Now the law says is that if I want to hire you, you have to demonstrate to me you have at least 2 clients that do the exact same work you're doing for me that you're doing for them. And then I have to verify it. Well, if your background is, if you're coming in to give me financial consulting and the next guy you're doing marketing consulting, that doesn't pass muster. So now I have to let you go. So I had to let go of 3 independent contractors who are all African American, and this is how they make their living. So clearly, on one hand, I believe labor was well intended with what they were trying to accomplish with reclassifying employees. On the flip side, they didn't consider the unintended consequences, and they certainly didn't consider the impact it would have on specifically the African American community. And when we look at that, we have to step up as a community and say, look, there's a conversation that needs to be had. And part of that conversation is, how do we build portable benefits as a national conversation? So if you're an independent contractor and you have a variety of services that you're providing for different people, then this is a low-cost way for people who would hire you to potentially participate in a fund that allows you to have those types of portable benefits. So those are conversations that are being had. So the good news is AB5 has created a conversation around building around a workforce that we believe is the future of the workforce in such a way that they would be able to benefit monetarily and through health benefits, et cetera, and still not overtax employers like myself.
So, Robert, let's speak to partnerships and collaboration, because we've had that conversation with a number of your peers in our earlier episodes, and certainly, we see that in your own work. #people, #partners, #promise is very important. Can you speak to collaboration and partnerships and the importance of that for community build, particularly because what we've certainly detected is a number of organizations now working more closely together than ever?
I've said to many people, as terrible as COVID is, it is the chassis by which it has forced a number of organizations to work together. Community Build's response to COVID-19 was to pull together over 30 nonprofits, churches, and key stakeholders to begin to look at how can we respond initially in one of 3 ways. A, assess our real estate and who can convert their property into an emergency operations center, distribution center, and or medical triage center should the hospitals become overtaxed. So that was the first thing that we did. The reason we did that is because the goal, when I took over Community Build, I started something called a culture of care. And that's a buzzword I'm trying to, or a statement I'm trying to get folks to adopt, or I should say striving to get folks to adopt. And the idea is with this is to create a culture of care where the nonprofits come together and begin to work together so that if a public safety agency like the National Guard or FEMA came in, that they wouldn't be reckless and over-police or over-enforce, but work side by side with the local nonprofits in a particular area to understand the area, the needs of the area, and respond accordingly. That was the first step. What this has turned into is just blowing my mind. We have a chapter now in San Diego.
Oh, really? Okay.
Of the community response system of San Diego as part of LA's. We have folks around the country who are asking us, how do we organize this way? So we're helping them. This has quickly becoming the Red Cross of urban America. We have also gotten together and said, look, let's collaborate. So those of you who are smaller and need assistance, we will come and back you up with volunteers or our own networks to make sure you're successful in your outreach. I have no government funding at this point. All the money I've raised, I've pushed back out to each of the agencies who are part of the network to make sure they have the appropriate supplies that they need and or services that they can pay for.
And where are you raising money from?
I've gotten, some of our partners would include people like City National Bank, who came to the table early on. USC has been a huge help. They provided me not only with a substantial donation, but they also provided me with 12 interns who serve as our back office for this.
Terrific.
And what we're doing with this is we're gathering the data of what everyone is doing collectively and individually. And I believe we're going to be able to tell a story to demyth, if you would, the idea that smaller nonprofits are not relevant in South LA. But when we collaborate, we can do far more work. And our data demonstrates that. So we currently have a quarterly report we're putting together to show all of the things we've done. For example, The network itself has distributed over 5 million pounds of food since March. Community Build alone has done probably £750,000 worth of food since March, and we continue to do that across the city in 5 different locations. And part of that is, again, connecting with people. So, for example, Pastor Anthony Williams at 88th Temple Church of God in Christ has become a distribution point for us. And what that does is it opens the doors for people to then use some of the resources that the church already has in that particular part of town. So these are the collaborations that are happening within our network, and then it's also a shared opportunity. So one of the things that I just feel blessed in this regard is that my reputation has been growing from the standpoint of I actually do what I say I'm going to do. So you go out and raise money, and sometimes people hoard that money.
Right.
I've been pushing it out. I call people regularly, hey, what do you need to be successful at what you're doing? Well, we need these supplies or what have you. Okay, we'll get it for you, or we'll get a resource for you in that regard. So that's how we're managing this collaboration around making sure that we have all of the necessary needs associated with COVID. And then this will turn into a disaster recovery system that would maybe address earthquakes later, et cetera. And what this has also turned into, because my initial plan, it's just funny how things work, was to use this, build it out, and then hand it over to a nonprofit who does more community organizing, because it's a model for that. And what it showed me is, well, this is now reinforming how I deploy safe passage workers.
Okay.
Perhaps they become part of the disaster preparedness network and retrain them in that regard. And so now we're looking at a whole new class of employee that could be associated with this as more funding comes in. So we're at a stage, what I didn't want to do is go to government up front. I wanted to build it out, take it from an ethereal idea to an actual reality, and then show folks how you can be a part of this, and then it become a part of a very needed system in South LA. Because in the beginning of this, if you remember, no one knew what to do.
Right, yeah.
Including our officials. And so that's what this has helped to solve.
And how large is your team at Community Build overall, may I ask?
We have 107 employees, 40 of which are seasonal. They come on during the summer to help with the Project Save in the about 13 parks throughout South LA. Our normal core staff is about 68 employees, half of which are full-time and half of which are part-time for the various services that we provide.
As we navigate this period of COVID and recovery takes place, what does South Los Angeles look like for you, and what time frame?
I don't think we're out of the woods, even when COVID is over. So across this country, things are going to be very different. However, I do believe there is a place to celebrate a bustling marketplace around what does come, and to see those who have gone through a community in transition where it wasn't highly regarded and has become highly regarded, where it wasn't a place that attracted business and now attracts business, be able to participate that and increase the level of mid-income earners from the community. That's, to me, what South Los Angeles looks like. Across this city, we have a lot of moving dynamics, and what I'm excited about, what the protest showed me, is that folks in our generation are managing a country that is being managed for the generation that's coming up right now. And they are defining their purpose, right? They're defining their purpose right now. And so what that means is, I believe we're going to have a whole new crop and group of people who may reimagine the marketplace in such a way that fits with family lifestyle in a way that we haven't seen in decades. So that's what I'm hopeful for in the future.
Well, we certainly are excited about your leadership at Community Build, and we've had a number of your colleagues on prior to you. So so we see just this new generation of leaders who are taking South Los Angeles forward, and we look forward to following that closely. Robert, this has been a great conversation, and I wish we had more time. But we certainly look forward to having you back on and following the progress of South Los Angeles, as well as the work of Community Build. But before we leave, we're going to wind down this conversation, as we do with all of our conversations, with just a quick lightning round where we get a chance to know a little bit more about you and your Los Angeles, or in this case, your South Los Angeles. So few questions, quick answers. Where are you from originally?
Los Angeles,
Which neighborhood do you currently live in, if you don't mind sharing?
Baldwin Vista.
Mobility is a big issue in Los Angeles. Uber, Lyft, yellow cab, bike, bus, walk, scooter, or metro.
Most of all of the above.
Okay, I'm sure Metro would love to hear that. Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, or Hulu?
Netflix for movies, Amazon for ordering. Hulu just came online.
Favorite LA restaurant or two, or favorite South Los Angeles restaurant or two?
Mastro's, and of course, Harold and Bell's.
You gotta love the pork chops and you gotta love the peach cobbler there for dessert.
Exactly.
Favorite spot to take a visitor to Los Angeles, or favorite spot in South Los Angeles?
For a drive, I love to see LA through the eyes of visitors.
Okay. Lakers or Clippers?
Clippers,
Dodgers, Angels?
Dodgers,
Rams, Chargers?
Raiders.
Okay.
I still consider them an LA team.
Okay. Favorite park in Los Angeles, or favorite park in South Los Angeles?
Kenneth Hahn, and of course, Griffith Park.
Bruins or Trojans?
Trojans.
Robert, this has been a great dialogue, and we really appreciate your time and your service to community, and we really look forward to having you back on and following the work of Community Build. Again, we want to thank our audience for tuning into this episode, and we hope you'll listen to some of the previous episodes, as this has been a great opportunity and a great honor to cover these 4 dynamic leaders who are moving South Los Angeles forward. And again, we really appreciate Los Angeles City Council member Curran Price for his kind introduction to this series, and we want to thank Darrow Nation for his support financially of this 4-part series as a sponsor. So to our audience, thank you again. We hope you enjoyed this program. We hope you'll join us next week as we look forward to another great conversation as we move from South Los Angeles to downtown Los Angeles. Until we meet again, stay strong and get involved. To learn more about Civitas LA and share feedback on this program, or if you have a recommendation about future programs, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com. And we hope you'll connect with us on social media, on Facebook at Civitas LA, Instagram at Civitas_LA, and Twitter at Civitas_LA.